ataweza kuapishwa na ataweza pia, wale wabunge watakuwa wanamuuliza maswali kuhusiana na utendakazi wake kama waziri wa ustawi wa mazingira na misitu. Tufuatilia matukio mbashara kutoka bungeni kwenye kamati ya uteuzi.
We have the Quran, the Bible and affirmation depending on your faith. You can choose one. Yes, there's only one. Take away the saucer. Takes a lot of space for nothing.
I, Rosalinda. I, Rosalinda Soipan Tuya, do hereby swear to testify on all matters in question and tell this committee the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Honorable Soipan Tuya, welcome to this committee. Honorable members, since it has been a good habit to declare some form of interest, the nominee appearing before this committee was my pupil in my law firm, and she became an advocate under my tutelage. Honorable Tuya, you're welcome to the Committee of Parliament of the National Assembly, chaired by the Speaker. You are truly here. We have members present. I will ask each member to introduce themselves, starting with the Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker. I wish to, as I introduce myself, I wish to congratulate with great pride Rosalinda Soipan Tuya, nominee for Cabinet Secretary, Environment and Forestry. I am extremely proud. I must declare my interest, Honorable Speaker. She was my student at the University of Nairobi. I now have 2 students nominees for Cabinet Secretary. That's my claim to fame. And I'm Gladys Boss, Woman Representative for Uasin Gishu County, and also Deputy Speaker for the National Assembly. Karibu sana.
Kimani Ishongwa, I have absolutely no interest to declare other than having served with her in the last parliament.
Yeah, my name is Opio Wandai, MP Uguja. Thank you.
My name is Owen Bayer, MP Kilifi North.
Congratulations, my sister. I must declare my interest. She's my good friend. My name is Rehab Mukami, County MP Nyeri.
I have no connection. My name's Ferdinand Wanyonyi, Member of Parliament, Kwanza, Trans Nzoia County. I've known you for quite some time. I have no other interest.
Thank you, Chair. George Gitonga Murugara, MP for Tharaka. No interest to declare. Safe to say that you used to call me Sir George, even when you were on the chair. And I was knighted by the Deputy Speaker, Madam Gladys Boss. On behalf of the Queen, may her soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you, Chair. My name, Kosing David, MP Pokot South, West Pokot County. I have no interest to declare. The nominee knows, Honorable Chair. I have no interest to declare.
Thank you, Speaker. Mheshimiwa, congratulations on your nomination. My name is Abdul Rahim Daoud, MP for North Imenti in Meru County. Thank you.
Good morning. I also want to say that Soipan used to be my friend, especially during the previous parliament. And I want to introduce myself as Honorable Mishi Mboko, MP Likoni constituency.
But we are still friends, Honorable Mishi. Are we not?
You are in the past tense. Let's leave it there.
And Nelson Arab Koech, a member of Parliament, Belgood constituency.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Caleb Amisi, MP Saboti.
Didoraso, MP Saku. Abdishuri, MP Banabana.
And Masemeri, MP Teso South.
Thank you, Speaker. I must declare she is a distant sister-in-law, Ole Tunaita Shemeji. Honorable Mule, MP Matungulu.
David Gikaria, Nakuru Town is constituency. Nothing much to declare. I used to deputize her in a committee in 2013, in the 11th Parliament. Asante.
Mr. Chair, I wonder why everybody has to quantify whether they have anything to declare. But I do have. Naisula Lesuda, MP Samburu West, and Honorable Soipan is the first Maa woman nominated to be a cabinet secretary, and I am extremely proud of her, although that will not hinder my duty here during this vetting process.
Excellent. Honorable Tuya will engage with you for 90 minutes. Oh yes, I'm forgetting. We have our secretariat led by our clerk. I'm sorry, clerk. Introduce yourselves, please.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. My name is Sarah Kyoko. I'm the acting clerk of the National Assembly, and I have with me Ms. Florence Abonyo, the director of Audit, Appropriation and other select committees, and Mr. Michael Karuru, who is the Deputy Director, Legal Services, together with other members of staff assisting this committee.
Thank you. Honorable Tuya, you have been a member of Parliament, so some of the members here are your colleagues. You've served with them. That notwithstanding, you're going to have an engagement with them to establish your suitability in discharging the duties for which the President has nominated you and forwarded you to Parliament for that purpose. The meeting here between the committee and yourself is going to be cordial, like it has been. That doesn't mean hard questions will not be asked if they are there. We advise you that communication be through the chair. You answer questions through the chair. Members ask questions through the chair. And we discourage an attempt to engage members directly. We will, after going through the preliminaries, give you 10 minutes for you to tell us the journey of your life to where you are. Thereafter, we'll have an engagement, and when we conclude, we'll give you another 3 minutes to recap what has transpired and your wish. In doing so, we want to ask you a few preliminaries in terms of documentation that you are asked to come with. If you have forwarded them to us, we'll expect you to have the originals to show the Secretariat to compare with what they have. If there's anything additional, they will tell me to ask you. Tax compliance certificate from KRA, do you have?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have it.
The Higher Education Loans Board clearance, you have?
Yes, I do.
Clearance with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission?
Yes, I do.
Certificate of Good Conduct from DCI?
Yes.
Have you ever been charged and convicted in a court of law of any offense?
No.
Are you a dual citizen of any sovereign other than Kenya?
No, my only citizenship is Kenya.
What is your financial net worth?
Honorable Speaker, if you will allow me to call you so.
Yes.
My total net worth is 156 million Kenya shillings.
Segregated as?
It largely comprises of immovable assets. I have 3 homes, one in Nairobi, one in Narok town, and another one in my village. Motor vehicles. I have apartments in Narok and also one in Nairobi. Plots of land, 2 in Kitengela, and also dairy business, and my shares from the Parliamentary Cooperative Society, Pakosa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what are your current and anticipated sources of income?
At the moment, I anticipate to get my gratuity from Parliament after serving for 2 terms, as well as the pension. Those are the only 2.
Okay. We will give you 10 minutes to make a short opening speech to tell this committee the journey of your life to where you are. If you take less than 10 minutes, the better.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. My name's Rosalinda Soipan Tuya. Born and raised in Narok County. And I must at the onset say that I'm honored and privileged to be among the presidential nominees for cabinet. I take it as, for me, being the first ever Maasai woman to be elevated to such a position. It is a position of privilege for which I'm grateful, and I know the amount of responsibility that lies on my shoulders in that regard. I am a 4th child in a family of 7. Typically growing up, typical village girl, I did tender to my father's cows and sheep alongside my older brother. I attended my primary school within Narok County in a school called Ololunga, or now Olentutu Arid Zone, and from the name, it's one of those institutions established under World Bank funding to support pastoralist communities. And I must say also that I finished my KCPE in that school and emerged as a top girl in the then Narok district. I proceeded on to my high school education in Moi Girls High School in Eldoret, but just for a short stint of 2 years, and had to transfer to the Kenya High School for health-related reasons, and completed my high school in 1998 from the Kenya High School. I proceeded to the University of Nairobi School of Law, where I graduated with a bachelor's degree in law in 2002, and immediately went on to the Kenya School of Law for the Advocates Training Program, where I acquired a diploma in law. And thereafter, in 2004, got admitted to the bar as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And a few years later, after working for about 5 years, I secured a scholarship to study a Master of Laws in Sustainable International Development in the University of Washington in Seattle, USA.
Honorable Chair, and I must say at this point that I consider myself a product of opportunity. And I say this because my father happens to be the only one of his 15 siblings to have acquired an education. And the story is long, but even his having to go to school was by chance. And in that regard, then, there followed a series of opportunities for my siblings and I, including a few of close family members. But the reason I emphasize this is because I have hundreds of cousins and close family members who have not had an opportunity like I did, just because my father had a chance to go to school. And that has been a driving force for me, because having started off as the village girl that I spoke about, up to a point where I had an opportunity to study abroad on a scholarship, the only difference for me and countless other young girls, particularly from my community, is opportunity. And that has always pushed me to be able to find a space for that next girl, because I know how important it is to afford somebody an environment to explore their potential. Honorable Speaker, coming to my career progress in terms of work, and I will relate it with the docket for which I'm nominated. I must state that my love and passion for environment again began at a very tender age. My father happens to be a very strict environmentalist. I remember growing in the village, I learned from a very early age the value of a tree, because you could not cut the branch of a tree from my father's homestead without his permission. And that set the pace for me to know the value of the environment, the value of trees. And my nomination comes at a time when I think Kenyans and the citizens of the world, we need to embrace environmental ethics if we are to save ourselves. My first job assignment was with a local non-governmental organization called MPIDO, which basically focused on integrated pastoralist development initiatives. And I joined in as a legal officer, and one of my main assignments was public interest litigation, coordinating issues of land and environmental governance. And one of the cases that I got involved in at that early stage of my work was offering technical support and mobilizing resources to support the famous case of the Ilchamos community, centering around the effects of the prosopis plant, that invasive plant that has become a menace, not just for that community, but many other communities in this country. And I think with that early engagement, and it is coincidentally, at this point, it is an issue that we must confront as a country. And I think with my interaction then with fact-finding and establishing ways of making sure that these communities do not have to suffer the effects of an invasive plant for which they had no contribution to its existence, sets me in a good place to be able to find a once and for all lasting solution, not just for prosopis. We have many other invasive tree species, like the cactus in the north. We have the hyacinth, which is choking our water bodies, and many others. At that point, I also got to participate in various regional and international fora, still in the area of land and natural resource management and governance. This include the African Commission for Human and People's Rights at the regional level. I also got to participate in various fora of the UN Permanent Forum for Indigenous Peoples, including being a member of the Indigenous Women's Caucus that again focused on matters climate change, and the role that women played in matters mitigation and resilience. My second job appointment, Honorable Chair, was in the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs then. I got seconded to the ministry as a UN volunteer specialist, and most of my work revolved around providing technical support in the development of the then National Action Plan and Policy for Human Rights. I also got to engage in developing policy briefs focusing on Kenya's obligations arising from regional and international human rights instruments. And after that, I joined the Kituo cha Sheria. It's an access to justice organization. I joined in as a legal aid coordinator and then again served on a very brief stint as the acting executive director. Most of my work again centered on public interest litigation, supporting indigent Kenyans, and notable cases that we dealt with which relate to the docket for which I'm nominated. I dealt with a case in the Tana Delta ecosystem, focusing on the environmental impact of government projects in very fragile ecosystems. Another one was a matter concerning rampant cancer cases in Marsabit County, largely attributed to oil exploration initiatives in that region. And what we were looking at and prosecuting on behalf of the communities as an interested party, Kituo cha Sheria, was to make sure that we insisted on the sustainability of any initiatives that would be established within community lands. Another case that I remember is a case in Mutomo area of Machakos County, pitting the Mutomo residents against multinational mining companies, and again in the area of the health effects of the mining activities, as well as the benefits accruing and how they would support the communities. Honorable Speaker,
1 minute.
After Kituo cha Sheria, I got a chance to work with the USAID on 2 projects, one called the Promara and another one, the Justice Project. I will ask for just 2 minutes and I'll finish. Promara, from its name, it centered around the governance issues around the Mara River and the larger Mao Forest Complex. I got to interact with government agencies, community engagements on participatory forest management, and even the Water Towers Task Force then, which now is the Water Towers Authority or Agency. After working with the USAID, I made my debut in politics in 2012 and served for 10 years as the woman representative for Narok County, and also served in the National Assembly as the first chairperson of the Speaker's panel, duties which I believe I did to the best of my ability. Let me state that one of the things that I did as woman representative for Narok County was to encourage our communities to engage in expanding their horizons in terms of looking for alternative sources of livelihood rather than, depending only on pastoralism, again because of the adverse effects of climate change that we are seeing, which are destabilizing the economies and livelihoods of these communities. I also focused on assisting women to think about clean sources of, or rather green energy in the domestic cooking, purchase of improved cook stoves, and as well as briquetting, again to divert attention from biomass fuel, which is largely what our local communities are consuming now, and it is coming to compromise the need for us to green our country. And right now, I'm serving as a nominated senator and nominated by the United Democratic Alliance. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tuya. I'll now open the floor to members to interact with you, starting with the Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Like I said, I already declared my interest. the nominee having been one of my top students at the university, but I will in no way be biased. So I can ask her questions as a teacher. Yeah, I mean, when you think of Kenya's environment, what people are asking, the most basic things, the ban on one-use plastic, the initiatives to try and include recycling to happen in this country, and then also to use renewable energy as an option to avoid destroying the environment, and of course the need to reduce carbon emissions as required by the Kyoto Protocol, which Kenya is in fact a signatory. I think Kenyans would like to hear what you're going to do about that, because the most basic of the environment, and none of it has happened in 59 years of independence. Thank you.
We'll take batches of 4, then come to you to respond. The Honorable Chungwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Just want to know from the nominee, Honorable Soipan, I'm sure you have traveled across the world as a member of parliament, and probably even before as you studied in Seattle. And in most cities in the world, properties fronting rivers are usually the most expensive and best places to live in. But in our own city here in Nairobi, all the properties fronting the river, nobody wants to be near them. Whether it's in Lavington, in Kilelesha, or anywhere in the city. What do you intend to do as the minister now in charge of environment, if approved, to make sure that you clean up our rivers and stop the habit of either residents of our residential areas from dumping into the rivers, and the very huge pollution happening from our industries, from upstream all the way from the sources of these rivers, and downstream as you go towards Ukambani, especially around the areas of Mlolongo, an industrial area here in Nairobi, in cleaning up the Nairobi River and indeed other rivers across the country. Thank you.
Wandai.
Yes, Honorable Chair, Honorable Soipan, there is the grave issue of encroachment on forests, on forest lands. Sorry, I haven't heard your voice on this matter, particularly considering the fact that you come from Narok County, the home of the great Mau forest. And you know the encroachment into Mau has caused serious devastation downstream, including other counties that are in Nyanza and elsewhere towards Tanzania. What is your view, really? Because now you must help us understand what your view is on the issue of conservation of forest, and especially the Mau. What is your take on the settlements that have happened in the Mau in the past number of years, including settlements by people of means who have set up farms, sometimes factories? Your silence on this matter is too loud for our comfort. Thank you.
Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. My name is Robert Mbui, Member of Parliament, Kathiani. Sorry, I missed the introduction part. Now, Chair, you'll allow me to raise this because some of these things are in public domain. The nominee, while acting as Speaker, chairing sitting of Parliament, during the debate on the controversial tax laws contained in the Finance Act of 2018, she deliberately and publicly, everyone saw, ruled that the ayes had won in the vote that was taken through acclamation, while it was very clear that the nays had won. I would like her to clear the air on that matter. And secondly, the Deputy President recently was on record proposing that individuals who live near forests could be allowed to cultivate the land of the forest.
On a point of order.
Yes.
I really don't like interrupting my friend Honorable Mbui. But, Honorable Speaker, you know, the nominee is being questioned on a matter of procedure in the House. And I think it is not lost on Honorable Mbui because, as we said yesterday, Honorable Speaker, it is not fair to play to the gallery and ask questions that want to portray a nominee in bad light in the eyes of the public who do not understand our own standing orders. And the Honorable Mbui, Honorable Speaker, is aware that on the particular question, really the question actually ought not to have been put since the 2/3 threshold had not been met. And the Honorable Mbui, being a seasoned member of this House, knows. And Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chair, I find it absolutely out of order for the Honorable Mbui to be asking such a question to the nominee, because it is simply meant to portray the nominee in bad light in the eyes of the public who do not understand our own standing orders.
Chair, allow me to confirm that it was not a question. I actually did tell her, the nominee, to clear the air. And I started, Chair, by confirming that this is information that is in public domain. And in fact, went on social media, and all over the country people are making jokes about it. So it's important, as we do the vetting, that some of these things that are not publicly come out so that the nominees can clear the air. I even already have the answer, but we are giving her an opportunity because we are giving her a chance so that she can talk to Kenyans. So, Mr. Speaker, I was talking about the controversial Shamba system.
I thought you had finished.
No, I was in the, he interrupted, Chair. He,
switch off your mic. Okay.
So thank you. The controversial Shamba system that the Deputy President alluded to was vehemently, opposed by the late Honorable Wangari Maathai, who was actually a renowned environmentalist and a Nobel Prize winner. I would like to hear her comments about that position. Thank you, Chair.
You may proceed to answer, but you may not answer the question on how you ruled when you are on the chair. You know very well, Robert, even speakers hold quasi-judicial authority. No judge is flogged to answer how they made their judgments. You appeal if you want.
Honorable Speaker, as a point of information, indeed Honorable Mbui is also aware that on that particular issue, on Article 115, that matter was even taken to court and the court made a determination on it. And he actually considered that he actually knows the answer. So it's superfluous to even pretend to be asking that question.
This being a vetting process, we fish far and wide. Go on.
Thank you, Chair, for confirming that.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I will start with a question by the Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Shole. And it touches on a wide array of issues. First, I will start, Honorable Gladys Boss, to say that Kenya is party to the Paris Agreement and the attendant Kyoto Protocol. And with that come a number of obligations touching on how to combat the number of issues that we have raised with regard to the amount of carbon emissions that the country is making, and I must start by saying that Kenya has been on a very good trajectory, because within the Paris Agreement, we are required as a state party to formulate nationally determined contributions. And the nationally determined contributions speak to the actions, the national appropriate climate actions that the country must take as a member of the global village to make sure that we are curbing the amount of carbon, greenhouse gas emissions that we are releasing to the air. And the the key sectors that are of interest as we speak, one is the energy sector, second is the transport sector, agriculture, and industry. And fifth, I think, is fifth is waste management, which you are speaking to when you talk about the ban on plastics. As we speak, the commitment that we have made as a country is that by 2030, we should have reduced our emissions by 32%. And that calls for a very, deliberate action to make sure that we attain that. Once confirmed, and I believe that this committee will find me favorable for confirmation as Cabinet Secretary for Environment, I know my intro is very full concerning the matters of waste management, the need for us to up our game in exploring renewable sources of energy. We are doing fairly well, and I know my colleague nominee for energy was here yesterday and spoke to the fact that Kenya is doing very well in terms of exploring geothermal, hydro, wind, and solar, which is the way to go. And as a country, within our NDCs, nationally determined contributions, we are even willing and ready to forego certain resources that we have within our country, which are fossil fuel based. And you know that is the trend that the country is taking. Despite the ravaging effects of our dwindling economy, as a commitment, Kenya is focusing less on the fossil fuel trajectory and more towards the renewable energy. As Cabinet Secretary, once confirmed, my first big assignment would be to attend the COP27 forum in Egypt. COP27 is the Conference of the Parties on Climate Change. Once confirmed as Cabinet Secretary, once again, currently Kenya holds the chairmanship of the Committee of Africa Heads of State and Government on Climate Change. And as Cabinet Secretary, I will be playing a very critical role at the interministerial level in terms of putting up a strong case for the country in terms of the loss and damage that we are suffering arising from the climate change effects, the need for financial and technological support from developed countries, which again is a discussion within the Paris Agreement. And I know that with the recent commitment and very aggressive pronouncement by the President for us to again increase our tree and forest cover, all this goes towards contributing to reduced emissions as a country, and it is a commitment, and these are issues that we are ready to run away with. In my thinking, with the aggressive call for tree planting even from the household level, combined with our Kenya Kwanza bottom-up economic approach, it is an opportune moment to recruit an army of young people who will be able to take active participation in greening our country and at the same time contributing to their livelihoods support. I intend, as Cabinet Secretary for Environment, once confirmed, to actually take the issue of waste management head on as a flagship project. We have a new law at the moment, the Sustainable Waste Management Act of 2022, fairly new and at its formative stages of implementation. It calls for a total re-engineering of how we manage our waste, and it starts and brings on board many players, waste service providers, producers and manufacturers. We have regulations currently under development which touch on increased producer responsibility right from the manufacturing stage. And when we talk about plastics, these regulations are driving our country to a point where any producer, any manufacturer should be aware of whatever products they import to the country, whatever manufacturing items they do, to make sure that at the end of the product, where does that product end? And that calls for us to move from the linear economy to the circular economy. And it is all about recycling. We need to start segregating our waste at source to make sure we don't mix the organic waste with the recyclables. We have hazardous wastes that we must segregate from source, and the responsibility goes on to the waste service providers. It moves on to the producers. And Honorable Deputy Speaker, allow me also to say that once confirmed as Cabinet Secretary, I know one of the biggest tasks that I would want to take on is creating a very well-coordinated action between the national government and the county government. When you look at our constitution, there's a very thin line between what it is the county government is supposed to do on environment and what it is the national government is intended to do. And I think it is intentional, because on matters environment, you cannot really create tariffs to say that this is only for the national government and this is only for the county government, and that calls for very close intergovernmental relations and coordination. Honorable Eshonwa, on the question of pollution of our rivers, it is a huge concern that, again, and it touches closely with the question of waste management. We are mismanaging our waste. It can be used for wealth creation, employment creation for our youth. Organic waste, we can use it to supplement the government efforts to make sure that our farmers have sufficient fertilizer to improve our agricultural sector. But we are mismanaging our waste. I know the late Mishuki did a good job of starting the cleanup of the Nairobi River. And he set a pace which, once confirmed as Cabinet Secretary for Environment, I will be taking up this particular issue as of great concern. Currently, we have certain water bodies where the plastics are more than the fish. The livestock are dying because of the plastic, ingestion. It is high time, Honorable Ishungwa and members of this committee, that we really have Kenyans. We must make a rallying call on Kenyans for everybody to know that any action or inaction around climate change that we engage in ends up being very costly for everybody. So I intend to be very hands-on on matters cleanup of our rivers. Honorable Wandai, forest encroachment, my silence is not as loud as you said. If you go to the parliamentary Hansard, you will indeed find instances where I have stood out, and very strongly so, to defend the need to conserve our forests, and Mau Forest at the core of it being that it is domiciled in my county. A lot of effort has gone into working around the Mau issue. My immediate predecessor, once confirmed, has done a good job of, we have already started the fencing of the Mau Forest. The first phase is done, and I have looked at the the pending budget for completion of the fencing of the Mau. The President is also very clear that it is a question of immediate action that we are going to take to complete the fencing of the Mau. That will settle the question on anybody encroaching. And it is not just Mau. The Mount Kenya forest, Aberdares, and the many forests across our country. It is not a question of whether or not we need to conserve our environment and our forests, and I'm very clear in my mind about that. Honorable Robert Mbui and Honorable Speaker, the question about the eyes have it story, I will not delve into it as you have properly ruled, but I'm happy that the Honorable Mbui says he was in Parliament, and I think I remember he was there, and he knows exactly what happened. And I was completely within the ambit of Article 115 of the Constitution and the standing orders. And I will not delve much into that. The second question raised by the Honorable Robert Mbui is concerning the remarks made by His Excellency the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, concerning matters the Shamba system. I know the Honorable Deputy President addressed himself to the issue and made some clarification on what exactly he meant. And without dwelling on that, I would like to say that under our Forest Management Act of 2016, we have a process of engagement between the Kenya Forest Service and forest adjacent communities. And this is a process called the PELIS scheme, which is plantation establishment and livelihood support, PELIS. And what this scheme is about collaboration between the Kenya Forest Service and communities adjacent to the forest in participatory forest management agreements through community forest associations, where these communities are allowed to get into the forest. Actually, I will correct that. It's not get into the forest. The forest adjacent communities are allowed to collaborate with the Kenya Forest Service in restoration of plantation forests. And it is instructive to note that under our gazetted forests, 96% consists of natural forests and 4% consists of commercial plantation forests. And the PELIS scheme is operated within the plantation forest and not the natural forests, where communities have access. Once the plantations are cleared, they get seeds and seedlings from the Kenya Forest Service. They plant the trees alongside short-term crops, and within that arrangement, the maize plantations are not allowed within the plantations. And it is a sustainable way of involving the communities in restoration of the forest, but at the same time deriving a livelihood from it. It has been a subject of abuse in some instances, and therefore it requires a lot of keen interest in enforcement and ensuring that it is done in conformity with the sustainable forest management systems. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. We'll take another batch. Owen Baya, Daud. Nianzie nyuma. Aya, Naisula, Gikaria, Mule, and Daud, I had mentioned you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Chair. Honorable Soipan, allow me to call you Soipan. Climate change is a controversial subject. At one time, Donald Trump said it is a hoax. And the conservatives and the Republicans in the United States say that climate change is something that was mooted by the liberals to make money and for commercial purposes, so that they can set NGOs, hold big conferences, and make money. But absolutely, climate change is what the Supreme Court would say hot air. Sometimes...
Are you quoting somebody, or that's what you believe?
I'm quoting.
Oh, okay.
I'm quoting. Now, my point is this. When does this climate change thing start and end, especially in terms of looking at the balance between food for people and climate conservation or conservation? Because I have a case where people are told, do not fish, because if you fish, this and this will happen.
because climate change says so. Don't use this certain fishing net, because if you use this fishing net, it will interfere with the ecosystem in the flow bed of the ocean. So people go hungry, and yet they live by the riverbank, they live by the ocean, just because of climate change. People cannot get firewood, you know, and they have to use the little disposable income they have to buy gas or other things, because they cannot go to the forest to pick firewood. Where does it end? Do we want to impoverish our people because of climate change? What are your thoughts? What is your belief? What do you think? Do you believe like the Democrats or the Liberals about climate change? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mheshimiwa Soipan. What are some of the recycling methods that you think this country can employ, keeping in mind that all the rubbish waste in the counties are dumped mostly in forested areas, and there is no way of, you hear in Mombasa, in Meru, in Kisumu, in all the big towns, there's so much rubbish everywhere. But disposing it off, it all goes to the forested areas. In your opinion, or in your policy directions, how are you going to tackle the rubbish, and what could be recycled? What would be the policy? Regarding carbon credits, what is your take on carbon credits?
Thank you, Chair. To the nominee, there are communities that are actually embracing conservation, and I'll use an example of my community who live around Kirisia Forest, who in 2019 voluntarily moved out of the forest and conserving the forest. Now, my question is, how do you intend to enhance participatory forest management and ensuring the forestry sector makes a contribution to poverty eradication? And my second question is this whole issue of corruption. I've seen that this administration is very keen, which is a good thing, on planting of trees, and a lot of money will be allocated to your ministry. And you know, as Kenyans, we get worried when we see a certain project at a certain time receiving so much money, knowing that someone can easily say, I planted trees and there was no rain and the trees died. So how do you ensure that you make sure that then this doesn't become a big scam?
Thank you, Chair. This climate change is actually, it is real, though by saying is hot air. You know, and I'm saying this, if you come to Nakuru, the Rift Valley basically, in Baringo, where we have Lake Bogoria, Lake Nakuru, Naivasha, the lakes are swelling to unimaginable levels. Actually, like in Nakuru, it has already consumed over 70 staff quarters. They are submerged already. It has taken out the 2 gates, and it's a concern. And also in Baringo, Lake Bogoria, and the ecosystem within that area is really, and it is. But in the process, Madam Soipan, is that there was a blessing that as the lakes were swelling, first there was not a blessing. First there was an issue of the lake swelling and consuming private land, where people own land, they have title deeds, and when the water was rising, it actually displaced almost 5,000 acres, and the owners were never compensated. But with that came with some blessing, where I don't know where fish came from. And there was a lot of fish suddenly. There was a Mzungu who was doing fish farming, and those ponds broke, and I think all the fish went, and the population. But now here is a Kenyan whose land has been consumed by the water, and fish is there. And when they go to fish on their farm, but water from the lake, they are arrested. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I'm fishing from my land, and you are arresting me. And it is serious. I said, I think just the other day, just last week, 2 young boys were jailed for 4 years. I was telling about when we had, I think it was Kindiki, on matters to do with the pro bono thing by the government. So I would really want you to address why KWS would arrest, and yet the boundaries of KWS or Lake Nakuru, as it is known, the park, they are known. But people are fishing outside the boundary and they are being arrested. So this is something that I would want KWS and maybe to give us some answers as to what would be happening. What is the compensation even for the people who are these are just normal people earning a living.
Thank you, Kikaria.
The last one.
We've heard the story.
So the question is, what measures are you going to take so that people can be able to earn a living out of their own land? Secondly, is that Kenya hosts the headquarters of both the United Nations Program UNEP and the UN Habitat. How do you intend to ensure that the country is at its forefront of protecting existing forests, expansion of afforestation, and promotion of sustainable and clean environment? Thank you.
Mole.
Thank you very much. This goes to the nominee. As you are aware, Honorable Soipan, Kenya is a signatory to COP26, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which happened last year. And the declaration is very clear that deforestation and land use must be put to the proper use. But this brings me the question whereby the appetite of land buying companies going for the large scale land within the country and subdividing it into very small pieces for profit making and leaving the host community in variable situation whereby animal migration for the pastoralists not to move from one corner to the other to subdivide, and that also caused conflict between tribes and neighbors within the country. I would wish to hear what is your interventions and to be employed to deal with this issue to ensure that we have a sustainable land use in this country. And do you propose what probably is happening in some countries like Rwanda, whereby they are collapsing villages and building town villages and leaving the vast land for the better use of land within the country for both agricultural and grazing? Thank you.
We can take one more. Emase.
Thank you. The nominee. Conservation is a function of both county and national government. What plans do you have? How will you ensure that there is collaboration in environment conservation between the two levels of government? We are aware that because of the diminishing sizes of land, our farmers are basically farming on every piece of land. There is serious deforestation, especially for some of us who come from hilly areas. You know, people have cut all the trees and they're trying to plant something to be able to put food on the table. So how are you going to collaborate with county government to ensure that we address the challenges? Thank you.
So, Soipan, you can answer those 6.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think the first question was from Honorable Baya. For sure, the climate change crisis is not a hoax. When you turn around, right from, and I know the Honorable Baya knows, because even in the coastal regions, the kind of changes that we are seeing of destruction of very sensitive ecological zones is causing untold damage. The prolonged droughts that we are facing in our arid and semi-arid areas are unprecedented. The rising lakes that Honorable Gikaria is talking about, the floods that are wreaking havoc left, right, and center. But the key question that Honorable Baya raises is how do we strike a balance between focusing on a climate action while ensuring that we do not compromise the livelihood concerns of our communities. And I will quote our Kenya Kwanza Alliance manifesto on the chapter on environment. We talk about the planet, the people, and profit. And when we talk about waste management, when we talk about the issues of climate smart agriculture, it is intended to help our people to adapt as well as grow resilience to combat the negative effects of climate change. And again, we are at a point where we need to critically focus on the policy directions that we need to take, as well as engagements at the global level to make sure that we arrest the adverse effects of climate change on our people without impoverishing them. So yes, the climate change crisis is real. Honorable Dawood, in terms of the recycling modules, I had mentioned earlier that we have a new law, 2022 Act on Sustainable Waste Management. It is very ambitious, but I believe we can do it. We need to move from a linear economy of single use of some materials which can be recycled to create employment for our people, as well as to reduce waste. And the underlying principle is that of reuse, recycle, and reduce. And that is the model that is cross-cutting in the Sustainable Waste Management Act. And underlying that is one of the major principles of sustainable development, which is the polluter pays principle. And that's what we are talking about. Our producers, our manufacturers, it is high time that we take responsibility right from the source of where we are manufacturing our goods and services, our goods particularly, to make sure that our manufacturers take responsibility. If it is a bottle of plastic, water bottle, we have banned plastics, single-use carrier bags, and the flat bags. There has been a modification because of certain packaging, which are allowed upon licensing. But really the direction we should be looking at is, because plastic is a petroleum product, and they contribute to a very high release or emission of greenhouse gas emissions in this country. And we need to get into a serious discussion. I know it has been very controversial and a lot of resistance from here and there, but we need to get into a serious discussion where between the national government, the county governments, the private sector, non-state actors, to know that whatever directions that we need to take, they may be hard and painful, but that is what we must do in order to save ourselves from the choking of the waste that we are seeing. So I think circular economy is the way to go. And when we start with the basics of how we handle our waste right from the domestic level to the waste service provider, to the county governments in terms of how to deal with our landfills, which are an eyesore everywhere. The Dandora landfill that we have here. We have countless young people, and for lack of a better term, I would call them the landfill community. Young people who are always scavenging and ravaging through the land, the likes of Dandora dam sites. We can convert that into an economic, an income-generating activity for them in collaboration with the recyclers and different players to have our country move from linear to circular economy. On the question of carbon credits, my take is that we have a huge opportunity lying under the carbon trading practice. we might not have explored it to our greatest potential. The first place to start is to start with a policy on carbon trading, and being that we are having a discussion here with the parliamentary committee, I think it's a direction that we need to take, because as we talk about climate action, we must explore alternative sources of funding. Because when we talk about, they call it the just transition, for example, going 100% green, it calls for resources, it calls for technology, and carbon trading is one source of, potential source of funding that we need to explore. I know certain entities like KenGen are already successfully trading in carbon, and certain non-governmental organizations. We have a lot to learn and to actualize this, because it is possible for us to do this. Honorable Lesuda, Kirisia Forest actually is a very good example of communities taking part in, contributing to restoration of our natural resources. The participatory forest management is a very potent and important consideration, particularly with regard to community forests, which are under the county governments, either through the PELIS process, where with close monitoring, awareness creation, and good collaboration between the Kenya Forest Service and the communities, organized through community forest associations, this is possible, where then we will be having a symbiotic relationship between the government in terms of communities participating in enhancing our tree and forest cover, while at the same time getting tangible benefits from forest resources. The question of corruption, it is real, and the President has made a clear declaration of a very ambitious tree planting exercise, which I think is the way to go, and an increase of funding to the Ministry of Environment. I will be keen, as the Cabinet Secretary once confirmed, charged with this very critical docket, to make sure that there is strict adherence to the procedures that are there to make sure that we have proper accountability and proper use of resources. And we will be moving from tree planting to tree growing. So we have to come up with a sustainable model where we are not planting trees and moving away, but growing, including how the trees will be nurtured to maturity. And I want to promise Kenyans that under my watch and guard, there will be tangible and visible results in this area. Again, we have KEFRI, KEFRI is involved with a lot of research into making sure that even as we embark on tree planting and tree growing, we will be doing species matching, so that we don't do haphazard kind of tree growing across the country, making sure that different ecological zones are matched with tree species that can actually thrive in the particular areas. Honorable Gikaria, yes, climate change is real, I have said that, and this is a matter that we'll need to look into. Your question is closely linked with that of Honorable Bayer, to make sure that as we run to embrace climate action, we must match it with the need to take care of the livelihood needs of our communities and our people, and particularly with the question of rising lakes and drought and all these other adverse effects. So yes, it is something that I will take up to look into it, to make sure that we have a comprehensive plan, so that we don't focus so much on achieving a reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions, while Kenyans are suffering in the process of the approaches we are using. Nairobi is a global city, being, I think, in the whole of the global south, It is only in Nairobi where we are hosting a UN agency, and it's none other than the UNEP, which is a very key agency in the issues that we are discussing, or those that are under my docket. The UN Habitat, again, is domiciled right here. The United Nations office in Nairobi. This presents a huge opportunity when we are speaking about the need to meet our obligations under the Paris Agreement. I will be, once confirmed, taking proactive steps towards establishing a working modality with these very strategic UN agencies within our reach in order to realize our vision and ambitions around climate action and environmental protection. Honorable Mule, yes, COP 26, and we are in the run-up to the COP 27, which will be held in Egypt in the next few weeks, a week or so. And you have raised a question about, how we will make sure that the land use plans that are being, actualized, or, the practice around large-scale land buyers. This is an issue which will require an interministerial approach. The Ministry of Lands has a big chunk of a responsibility to play with regards to land use planning. And I know within the cabinet we have thematic committees, and this is an issue of grave concern that I will be taking up with my colleague in the lands docket to make sure that we are having sustainable land use plans before any project is actualized. And again, NEMA is under my docket, the docket that I'm interviewing for. And land use planning, the need for very serious environmental impact assessments to be done before any such projects are set up, is an issue that I will be taking up once confirmed for this position. Honorable Emase, the need for close collaboration between the county and national government, that cannot be overemphasized. The fourth schedule of our constitution, in dividing the functions on environment between national and county government, the function of environment, the conservation of the environment and natural resources lies squarely within the national government. But at the same time, the questions of air pollution, noise pollution are devolved. And again, under the fourth schedule, we have certain national government policies that the counties are mandated to implement with regard to soil and water conservation and even forestry. So you find that there's a very intricate link between what is to be done by the national government and what is to be done by the county government. And that leaves me with a responsibility to take up the need to engage with the Council of Governors to make sure that we are well coordinated and we see some good results in the area's environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Koech, Amisi, Raso, Ferdinand. Oh, Sharia, you want? You have not done the right thing. Raise your flag. So let's start with Koech, Amisi, Sharia, Raso, Sharia. Then we come to Rehab. We come to Ferdinand. We can take all of you now. Soipan, you'll take all these honorable members' concerns. Each one of you, one issue, please.
Okay.
Koech?
Thank you, Chair.
Mishi, did you raise as well? Okay, you'll be the last.
Thank you, Honorable Soipan. You mentioned the issue of Mau. You and I have been very passionate, but on different ends, about restoration of Mau. First of all, it's done now. It's been restored, and the fencing, and we fully support it. But in the process, many of the people who were pushed out of Mau still hang around there. It's still a problem to the forest and to themselves, because they are grouped in villages, small villages around the forest, which is a threat again, because they might just go back. And I think it is important that we find a long-lasting solution. Either it is going to be interministerial to relocate all those who were evicted out of Mau in a more neater way than the way it was done before. I would like to know your take on this, Madam Soipan.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, allow me to say this. We normally rebuke and demolish corruption and scoffs at those culprits, but we never praise and honor those who keep their hands off the public offer. And you can see from this file, there's no any matter of corruption raised against the nominee, and for that I want to praise you for that. And I hope you will continue keeping your hands off the public offers. You are not going to be assimilated. Over to that, my question is, of course, that this docket you have been given, you are going to be at the center of climate change. Climate change has become the global discourse. Each and every president at the UN address is always on climate change. Can you help Kenyans understand the various protocols and agreements, right from the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, all the agreements that Kenyans has, and the success of it as a country?
Russell.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Honorable Soipan, congratulations for your nomination. My question is on conservancies. What is coming up in recent times is individuals, groups, and NGOs are coming up with conservancies whose management falls outside the realm of government. And yet we know KWS and KFS are the two bodies that are vested with conservation, both physical and otherwise. What is your take in terms of having a centralized management system in terms of achieving synergy in conservation? Also on the same, Marsabit Forest and Marsabit National Park actually is the only park in the county of Marsabit. But yet currently we are experiencing the issue of animals straying outside the park and destroying people's properties and shambas. But the Act 2015 that was passed in the 11th Parliament was supposed to provide compensation. So do we still believe in that act if it cannot be enforced? Thank you, Chair.
Sharia.
Chair, I'll pass. My question was asked by
Thank you.
Mheshimiwa.
Thank you, Chair.
You should emulate Sharia.
Okay, Chair. My concern is about the rapid population growth in our urban cities. What will you do to ensure sustainable use of the environment and natural resources? For example, in your county, Kajiado, if you go to Kitengera, you'll see that the residents and the manufacturing, they are next doors. And many children are developing chest and respiratory problems. I don't know what you are going to do. I need to hear, because I think I would suggest you work with the county government. They do proper planning. Thank you.
Ferdinand. The
Honorable Soipan, congratulations for being nominated for this position. And I think from what you have presented today, I want to say congratulations too, because you seem to understand the ministry
The problem with the ministry and where we are, if you keep it up like that, I think the problem we have in this country will be a problem of the past. However, we may do so much as a country, but our neighbors, what mechanism are you going to employ to bring the cooperation between Kenya and the neighboring states, particularly the West, so that whatever we are doing here is actually copied elsewhere? Because climate change, I think, is basically a frustration order of view. We may do so much from what you are saying. And of course, our neighbors don't do anything, so we just back to square one. So what are you doing? What are you going to do to be able to cooperate with the neighboring states? Because of the world in which we are today, seriously, actually, we just have to do something. But I think you're up to the task. Thank you. Good. There's a comment. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Mheshimiwa Soipan, let me hear your views as regards riverine afforestation, because we seem to be blaming climatic change for our rivers drying up, as a result of which population does not have water. Many of the rivers are now dry. They either be restored through massive afforestation, or we will just forget about ever having permanent rivers in Kenya. Number two, what about sand harvesting? Another man's destructive activity, which is happening across the country. When these rivers dry up, people descend on them to make wealth by harvesting sand and selling it, as a result of which the problem deteriorates. What are your views on this?
Posing.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Soipan, I would like to hear, and many Kenyans would like to hear, what will you do that will really be like either a change or something new or something that will go into record that you came and you did when you're not the Minister for Environment, if this Parliament approves you. Now, I'm taking an example. If people were to talk about the late Michuki, they will remember Nairobi River. Your predecessor, people will remember about Mao. So what will you be remembered as Honorable Soipan having done? I don't think if these international meetings and so on will make you a name. What will make you a name? And finally, when people talk about environment, Honorable Chair, through you, Honorable Soipan, people talk about green areas. They talk about Mount Kenya, come to Mao, come to Nairobi. What about the drought that is going on now in this country? What is the relationship between that and also an environment? And when will the Minister for Environment will be known in the entire area from Lodwar to Tana River? Thank you, Chair.
Mishi, the Honorable.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. To the nominee, I just want to talk about two areas which I feel that the minister, or rather the government, has not tapped on the potential it has. One, it is the issue of the Mangrove Forest, which is in Lamu and Tana River, and it's about 60% of the mangrove in Kenya. That is an area which you need to look at and know what plans you have to ensure that as part of afforestation, you can tap on that. The other issue is our econ tree, the baobab. The information we are having right now, it is that there is a certain organization, and I think the name is Ariba Seaweed International Limited, which they have employed some guys in the area of Kilifi Tezo. They uproot these baobab trees and they transport it to Georgia in United States of America. So I think Kenya is a signatory to the Declaration on Deforestation and Land Use. So you need to check on this area and see how you can rescue these icon trees. The other issue, I want to echo what Mheshimiwa Mukami has just said on the issue of environmental assessment. We have mining in Coast Region in Kwale, and that is the titanium. So recently what we have found is there is some negative effect in terms of disease, and there is skin disease. So many people experiencing a skin disease as a result of the titanium. So this is also an area you need also to know. Anytime there is mining, you need to do an effective environmental assessment to know the impact, whether negative and even positive. I thank you.
Thank you. Soipan, you can proceed to answer or respond to those.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. We'll start with a question by the Honorable Nelson Koech on the Mangrove Forest, the plight of the evictees. I know it's the subject of a court ruling that was made recently, but I must state that just like I said, in the process of conserving our environment, we must not forget the plight of Kenyans affected by certain actions that happen. Kenya is right in step with regards to the international standards on evictions and what to do with people affected by such evictions. And these are Kenyans, even from a human rights perspective, who still have a dignity bestowed upon them. And I will not talk much about it. I don't know if the case is a subject of appeal, but it definitely is a matter that we cannot close our eyes to in terms of the plight of the affected communities. Honorable Hamisi, I will make sure to keep my hands off the public office, so that if I ever get vetted by any such committee of parliament, that my file remains clean. On the global discourse around climate change, yes, Kenya is signatory to the Paris Agreement and the attendant Kyoto Protocol. We have so many other multilateral environmental agreements that Kenya is party to. Actually, the ministry has a fully fledged department that deals with multilateral environmental agreements. They come with a number of obligations and frameworks for engagement of Kenya with the globe, with the nations of the globe. From my past experience as a lawyer and having worked in various capacities with international and regional fora, I'm going to make sure that Kenyans gain maximally from each and every instrument, regional or international, that we sign to ensure complete domestication according to the Constitution. Honorable Dido Raso, the question of conservancies and the uncoordinated manner of conservancies, I think this is an area which falls squarely on my colleague in the docket of tourism and wildlife, because the conservancies are not actually under the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. But I always struggle between where does the conservation of the environment start and where does that of conservation and management of our wildlife start. I mean, they are very closely linked. That I know that in the course of my duty, once confirmed for this, I will have to confront such matters, because it is conservancies are everything to do with the environment. Conservancies and wildlife are actually about it's about conservation, and so I will endeavor to engage with my counterpart once confirmed in the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife to look into the issues that you have raised, because indeed there has to be coordination to make sure that any new models of conservation are in step with the need for good governance and sustainability, taking into account the interests of the conservancy adjacent communities. On the question of the Marsabit National Park, again, the question of human-wildlife conflict is a menace that is affecting our communities. The need to actualize the law on compensation. I will not delve much into that again because it is not within my docket, but I know I will be confronting that, and at the ministerial level, I would be keenly interested even to work closely with a colleague in charge of that particular area of concern. The Honorable Mukami, high population growth in our urban areas, and the establishment of industries, some very harmful. We are currently confronted with a number of litigation around effects of environmentally unfriendly industrial developments that have happened in residential areas. This squarely falls under the National Environmental Management Agency, under my docket, and it is a question of really looking at the effectiveness of the processes that we are currently employing in environmental impact assessment to make sure that we do not compromise the quality of life of Kenyans. Because at the inception stages of every project, the question of proximity to human life has to be taken into account, especially industries which might be the subject of hazardous emissions. So I can assure you that it will be an area of keen concern to make sure that our environmental impact assessments are being employed in the proper manner. Honorable Wanyonyi, the question of collaboration between Kenya and its neighbors, very critical. We might come up with very good policies and climate actions within Kenya, but then the same actions get compromised because of the action or inaction of our neighbors. And that is the reason why we have regional and international fora where we engage on matters climate action. What I know I will be able to do is that Kenya, being the holder of the chairmanship of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change at the ministerial level, because Kenya is at the chairmanship, I know my role will be critical at the ministerial level. I will endeavor to create a rapport and good working relationship with my colleagues in the region at the ministerial level, once confirmed, again to be able to address these matters of critical concern. The East African Community is a forum again where these matters will be prosecuted at various levels, at the presidential level, ministerial level, where we can be able to find synergy in terms of the direction we take on climate action and environmental protection.
Yeah, I just want to let the appointee know that I am on the border. I get a lot of traffic of charcoal all the way from Uganda.
Yeah.
And they're actually destroying that area, coming to us. We are very strict. When you get the charcoal dealers, they tell you they are from Uganda. So there's nothing actually stopping them from doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Resistance, yes. Next.
I actually have one more question.
From
three members.
Murugara.
Three actually. Honorable Murugara, riverine afforestation. Yes, we can blame so many things on climate change, but within that climate change crisis is a huge percentage of our own contribution. I'm alive to that fact, Honorable Murugara, and I'm going to create a mechanism through which we can rally Kenyans to embrace environmental integrity, yeah, and behavioral change right from your own household, and that can be done. Yes, the issue of sand harvesting, again, we may hide our heads in the sand on matters sand harvesting, but it's actually a source of income for millions of Kenyans. But at what expense? Our rivers are drying up. We need to interrogate this. Again, this is a function under the county governments, but NEMA plays a critical role when it comes to, if there's need to look at, appropriate sand harvesting areas. I'm just thinking we need to engage seriously, and it is the same with the charcoal trade. where there's a ban, yet a huge percentage of our populace depend on this particular trade. So this I'm going to take head on, and we should have some clear direction, because we cannot continue destroying ourselves as we watch. Honorable Kosing, what I will be remembered for, I am focusing on two critical things: circular economy, to deal with our waste management menace. Greening Kenya, again, is going to be very big for me, and I will make sure that by the end of my tenure, everybody will remember me for these two. Honorable Mishi Mboko, the issue of mangrove forests, very critical. It has become a fragile ecosystem. When we talk about the biggest carbon sinks, mangrove forests come at the top, followed by bamboo and other tree species. Within the ambitious plan that the President has rolled out, at the key core of it is the need to reclaim our mangrove ecosystems because of the critical role they play. I am made to understand that one species of mangrove in the area of carbon sequestration is equal to about 10 terrestrial trees. So that's how important it is. On the question about baobab uprooting or cutting, I would be interested. Once I get confirmed, kindly come to my office and brief me on this one, because we must take immediate action.
Do you mean illegal export?
Honorable Chair, at the moment,
some photos, yeah.
We have a total ban on logging, so it cannot be legal.
Actually, she's not talking of logging. She's talking of uprooting and then exporting live trees.
So I think it's one and the same thing.
That is the work of KEFIS, which is still under your ministry.
They term it biopiracy.
Yes.
Biopiracy.
Yes, I think it is still affecting our trees. Whether they cut, uproot, or fell, it's still destruction. And I would want to understand in which context that is happening. So, Honorable Mishi, please pray for me to get confirmed and come over and we tackle that.
You need to have vote more than the prayer.
I know. Finally, Honorable Chair, and I think this ties closely with the question raised by the Honorable Mukami on environmental impact assessments. And I think I have spoken to that in depth.
Give Daoud the last bite.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I already gave you an opportunity.
Chair, Honorable Soipan has talked about air pollution. She's talked about water pollution. Honorable Soipan, what about noise pollution? There are bars and restaurants who play loud music in residential areas, not just in Nairobi, all over the country. So we need to know how that can be sorted out, because there must be some law regarding the timings and sound protection and all that. Thank you.
Yamasa, you'll be the last for now.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable nominee, you realize that for you to be able to achieve your objectives, you need a robust, vibrant, and a motivated team. There's the issue of welfare. And I want to give at least a question that has just been sent to me by a Kenyan, concerned Kenyan. For example, KFS, they do not have a medical cover, a comprehensive medical cover. So when one of them falls sick or is injured, assuming it's a forest ranger, they have to do a fundraising or take a loan to be able to address to that particular challenge. Then two, there is no risk allowance for these forest rangers. Then number three, they are understaffed and there is lack of career progression. So what are you going to do to address that challenge? Because without a motivated staff, you may not be able to realize your objectives. Thank you.
Excellent. You can answer those two.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yes, the question of noise pollution, it's huge. Again, being a devolved function, we must work closely in collaboration with the county governments to make sure that the licensing of some of these businesses have to take into cognizance the location, proximity to other establishments that may not. Somebody wrote me a text the other day saying that there's very loud music from a discotheque which has been constructed or established right next to a children's hospital. You know, so these are real issues that Honorable Dawood, again in very close collaboration with the different players, I will take up to ensure that we are well regulated and coordinated in how we do our planning. You know, setting up a discotheque next to a hospital or a church next to, you know, or a mosque for that matter, next to areas where, you know, pollution, noise pollution would be of concern to the people around there. We can really be able to plan ourselves well. Honorable Emase, the question of the human resource and making sure that I have a well-motivated team. As you would know, the docket is very wide with a lot of work, and this would be greatly compromised if I do not have the right manpower. For example, the Kenya Forest Service, we are talking about greening the country. The Kenya Forest Service is at the core of that ambitious program. I will be reviewing the current terms of engagement. I have already gotten reports about understaffing, and we'll be looking at the other welfare matters in collaboration with the Public Service Commission to make sure that, you know, as we become ambitious about tackling climate action, then we must have Kenyans owning the process. And least of all is the people who are working within the ministry. So thank you for raising that, and it will be a matter that I'll take up as of immediate concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Soipan. I'll give you 3 minutes to tell us your final wish.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I take this opportunity once again to thank the members of the committee, starting with yourself, Mr. Speaker, and former colleagues. Yes, former because I'm a member of the Senate. I'm still having a challenge, you know, understanding that I'm no longer a member of the National Assembly. I am very grateful for this chance and opportunity, and thank you for the questions raised. They have been of a great challenge, really, and just reminding me of the heavy responsibility on my shoulders, the matters that are very real, the globe over, which are subjects of the current geopolitics and the global recession, because again, Honorable Chair, there is a very intricate link between environmental issues, poverty, and the well-being of Kenyans. So I understand the monumental task ahead of me, and once confirmed, I'm looking forward to good working relations with the House, the National Assembly, to make sure that we push through some of the immediate legislative and policy issues that we require to actualize our plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now release you to go to your other duties. And Sergeant, you can show the nominee the way out. And thank you for saving us 1 minute and 11 seconds. You are now released. We are adjourned up to 2:16. You may trek to the room where you trekked yesterday at the adjournment.
And that's the end of the vetting exercise of the second cabinet secretary nominee of the day, Rosalinda Soipan Tuya. The cabinet